My Govan and Melonin, and well met indeed. I'm Arakir Galajerthan, head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome to the first of the version 3 overviews. Allow me to just state this will be the only one that covers a single faction. All of the others, as I have laboured the point heavily the past few months, will be broken down into culture groupings. So, for example, the video containing Gondor will deal with everything pertaining to Gondor, Dol Amroth, the Northern Dunedain, and the Arad Anaim. This was the only one for a single faction, and it is, of course, the remnants of Angmar here in the north. So let's not beat around any bushes and throw our stones straight in. The size of your domain is unchanged from previous versions with 3 regions: Litash, Shadoon, and Khan Dum. Mount Graham, Mountains of Angmar, and the Old Witch Realm, for better wording. Your initial army is relatively small. You've got a small army in the fort there, a small army in the southern fort just there, and then each town has a small garrison of relatively minor troops. Your capital is Khan Dum, and from there comes forth your leader. If we look at the family tree, it is, of course, Overlord Agandawa, Lieutenant of Mordor. His wife Zirabel and he have given birth to 2, Inzilbeth and Fanuzir, who is yet to come of age. Inzilbeth married into the family of the North, or rather Lord Skuld married into the family of Agandawa to cement the alliance with Mordor, and he stands as the faction heir as part of his joining the family. In addition, Hunvorn is part of your family tree, so if Skuld were to die before a Fanuzir comes of age, Hunvorn would become the heir. But he, of course, is married to Galathnis, who passed away some 1,500 years ago, because, of course, he is a Wraith of Cardolan from the original iteration of that place. The unique bodyguards, then, as we go through, Agandawa comes with a unit which has no replenishment for you because you can never train them, and that is to say he comes with Temple Wards, Legio 1 Khan Dum. So, Temple Wards, you'll never get free upkeep for them unless you put him in a fort. Speaking of forts, Hunvorn comes with a unit that you might expect, given that he's a Wraith of Cardolan, and that is Barrow-wights. So a very formidable general there. In fact, Agandawa and Hunvorn are arguably the best two, because we move on to Morholt, who does have a unique bodyguard of Men of Rudauer. He has Rudauer Huskars, who are an excellent post-barracks event strike infantry unit, but they don't have the defense or the longevity capacity of the Temple Wards and the Wraiths. Barrow-wights, rather. So Morholt is a very useful general early on, but he tapers off in the later stages of the game. But a general who will be useful to you for time immemorial is Drangu the Bloody, because Drangu comes with Mount Graham Raiders. He is a mounted bodyguard, which is a huge boost, and he is a cavalry archer, which is another excellent boost. Finally then, in Litash comes Lord Skuld. Angmar have the wonderful designation in being one of the few nations in the game whose every starting general is custom. And he has Dark Blade, so he is a dedicated archer, elite archer, I should say. So a very useful unit as well. But as I say, none of your starting generals come with the standard bodyguard of Angmar. So consider yourself lucky. Your diplomat comes from the Barad-i-Heleg, or Barad-Heleg, which is Ice Tower, and that's where your diplomat comes from. The next nearest diplomat for yourselves is from the Chambers of Gundabad, or the Gate of Gundabad, I believe. Or you can head south to either Desmond-Dyker or Numidas, or maybe not one of them, actually, but certainly Bree. So those are your diplomats. Rebel expansion, then, of course, you can't go east. Mount Gundabad is in the way. You cannot really go south too effectively, because Morvatarth and Nokfar are your only offerings, and then you hit your enemies. So west is your destination. You've got Athelin, you've got Gobadrine, Angsul, Fuerost. Many options, and if you can get there in time, Barketa or Nosgelon, but I doubt that very much. But those few places to the south are worthwhile mopping up, and then you've got plenty of offerings heading west. Neighbours and diplomacy then, you start of course next to Gundabad, and you are allied to Mordor, the Goblins of Moria, and Gundabad itself. Your enemies with a lot: the Northern Dunedain, the Breeland, the Dwarves of Eredluin, the Greyhavens of Linden, the Realm of Imladris, and the Independent Realms. They are all enemies of yours. So do be on the lookout for the sheer number of people who want to kill you. Now, most of them, however, do start quite far away, so you are relatively safe at the start. But do note that everyone, basically, in this general area, All of the people you will see here are all at war with you at the game start, so maybe heading out on diplomatic peace missions might be worthwhile. Economy, buildings and blacksmith. You are a Northman faction, essentially. So you only get... four. You get 4. I was going to say 3. You get 4, with black iron plate being the highest tier for yourself. Economy, it's relatively easy to make money as Angmar, but do note that you do not get large cities. So you will get castles and strongholds, and then you will get towns, large towns and cities, but not large cities. You can't go to the highest tier of towns, so you'll get a little bit of a debuff economically there, but that's very late game, so you probably won't notice. Specific unique buildings for Angmar, there aren't really too many to be honest, but do note that your recruitment comes from various different locations. So your human units, or rather your Angmarim units, come from the town guard. So Angmarim archers, Angmarim infantry, and then later on that'll turn into Iron Crown, halberdiers, warriors and longbowmen, etc. Your men of Ruhrdaur will come from the Ruhrdaur camp, specifically Hillman camp and then Hillman barracks, and that trains all of the Ruhdaurans. And finally, the Wargs are the only units to come, of course, from the stables, which is pre-built here. A Warg camp, and then the second tier of that is the Mount Graham stables, giving you the Mount Graham units. So your recruitment is split up a little bit. Rather than infantry, archers, cavalry, you're broken down to certain types of infantry, or certain types of humans, another type of humans, and then cavalry. So there's a little bit different there. Do note that your Barrow Wights come from the 3rd tier of your Shrines of Melkor. So your Dark Temple of Melkor can train Barrow Wights, but only in certain locations. So you won't get them everywhere, but that's the building that trains them. And you'll know where you can train Barrow Wights because the Barrow resource will be present on the map. So a quick glance of Eriador, for example, you will note that Anuminas has barrows just outside, Fornost has barrows just outside, other key locations with barrows such as Ostsul, you may not be able to notice them immediately, but they are there. Going a little further afield, even places like Isengard has barrows, and Edoras has barrows. So anywhere where there are barrows, you get Barrow Wights. And I think, unique building-wise, that is it, if memory serves. I don't think there's anything more that Angmar get. No, not really. So there we are. Now, of course, you do also get Barrow Wights, rather specifically from Mengelin, from the actual crypt building there. Meaning that if you then also build the Dark Temple of Melkor, the highest tier, Barrow Wights train faster from this one region than anywhere else. And from this region, they will train really damned quickly. But everywhere else, they train relatively slowly. Scripts then for Angmar, of course. We were keeping it hidden for quite a while, but then it was let loose to you all with version 3. The Witch King of Angmar will return to you, and that is your only script. You will need to capture and hold both Imladris and Fornost. That is it. We didn't want it to be a super late game thing, so you can get him relatively early. So take Fornost, take Imladris, and you will get the Witch King. He spawns in Khan Dum. Now, if he were to die, he does not respawn to you. If he is killed in your service, he returns to Mordor, and that's it. You only get him once, so be careful. He spawns with your elite cavalry unit. I believe they are called Guardians of Khan Dum. I don't think you can train them straight away. So he's a very powerful general. But that is the only script for Angmar. Now we come to map changes. There aren't too many for version 3, save for the introduction of Bar Khaleg, which of course was added in version 3, so that's different from 2.2. Otherwise, the north remains the same, save of course for Berzikul and Mount Gundabad, both one becoming their own faction, and 2, Berzikul even being added. So those are the new map changes around you. Tips and difficulty for Angmar then, it's difficult to say at this time because everyone's mileage will vary, but I've seen people saying that they are easier than they were before, and I've seen people saying they are harder than they were before. Given that Angmar used to be one of the harder campaigns, that doesn't bode well if you struggle with the game. You may find them to be crushingly difficult. Others may find them to be an absolute doddle. It really is difficult to say, but one of the best tips I would submit is taking Morvatarth and Nothroclaw relatively early and trying to shut down the Dunedain quickly before Ered Luin gets through the rebel garrisons in northwestern Eriador. because once Ered Luin arrives, you're in real trouble. But the Northern Dunedain you can match in the early game, and you have a bit of a chance to take them out. Bree will never be a problem for you, save for their numbers, but in terms of troop quality, they're nothing. Of course, Imladris is a real threat, and in my own campaign for Angmar, I rushed Imladris and defeated them almost immediately, but they probably won't let you do that now because Camath Bryn, as you can see, is taken by them on turn 1 if you play as Angmar. So it's difficult to rush them. So the campaign probably is a bit tricky. And for that you will need some excellent units. So join me now as we dive over to the battle map to show you what Angmar can field in the war for Eriador. Welcome then to the battle map for Angmar. So a quick overview of Angmar's new roster in version 3 shows you that they now do a little bit of everything, with a unique little twist being that their dedicated cavalry, so the cavalry you can train anywhere and all the time, are all wargs and are all orcs. So the only human cavalry you get are the very late game Guardians of Khan Dum, which is a nice little trait for Angmar. You will note, of course, the biggest difference from version 2.2, if you have been under a rock in terms of DaC news, is that the orcs are no longer the chief proponent of the army. Orcs now just field those cavalry battalions for you and are otherwise not present. However, before we dive into the actual roster, do note that you can train Snow Orc Marauders as mercenaries in Litash, Mount Graham and Kandum itself. You also, from the guild, which I forgot to show you because I'm an idiot, in the first half, the Brawlers Guild that you get does give you both of the lower tier Orc Skirmisher units. One throws a javelin and one's just a raider. So you do get dismounted orcs, but they come from your guild or they come as mercenaries. You don't get them as mainstream. So let's dive right in then. So the early tier is dominated by Rudawa, really, and it's not till the later game when they go out of the roster. And certainly the very early tier, they will be the main bulk of your army. But the main unit, if I can say main too many times, are the conscripts. This is your basic entry-level unit. They are conscripts, and the hint's in the name. They have a 2 attack, a 2 charge, and a total offense of 6. So not wildly great, but they're much better than Snagger. Their morale is poor, their morale response is poor, but they are relatively cheap. I should state before we go on that Angmar really have been based as though they are a Northmen faction. Because whilst they're not culturally and lineagely descended from Northmen, they are akin to Northmen, and that is what we have gone for. So they are based off of Dale stat-wise, if you are interested, but certain units, of course, have different outliers to that general principle. First thing you will get with Rudaw, and one of the most useful units for your entire campaign, are, of course, and one of the most iconic, the Rudaw Pikemen. Now, they are pikemen, which is excellent, and there are 153 of them, so they are really very useful. Their attack is relatively low, their charge is 5, and their defense is 7. But do remember that a pike unit, one of the best ways to try and think of pike units is to either multiply their attack by 3 or their defense by 3, in my opinion, to take into account the attack animation. So they are really actually very, very good and should really be up there with that second tier, if you ask me. They are 520 gold coins, though, so much more than the conscripts, even though there are less of them. You have to pay the hillmen a little bit more to fight for you, whereas the conscripts have the threat of losing their families and homes, whereas the men of Rudaw don't necessarily have that as much. They fight with you, not necessarily for you. Obviously, they do fight for you, but it's a bit of a distinction in the fact that they're fighting alongside your men rather than under your rule. Although they are under your rule, but you get what I mean. Next up are the hillmen. They are another one of your sort of earlier tier trash, but they are slightly better than conscripts in that they have a 4 attack and a 3 charge with a 4 total defense. So their defense is lower than the conscripts, but their attack and charge is better. So as with almost every nation in the game, there's a defensive starting unit and an aggressive one. And the hillmen fill that role. Now they are mercenaries, which is why their recruitment cost varies, but I should imagine it's somewhere in between those two. I didn't look it up. Lastly then are the Rudaw Savages. These are the units that you get at the very beginning, as I say. This is your trash tier, and you get Rudaw Savages. They have a 6 attack, a 6 charge, and are effective against armor. They have a 6 total defense as well. So a same defense as the conscripts, although it is in defense skill and armor with no shield. With a higher attack than the hillmen and a higher charge than the hillmen, with armor piercing, makes them one of your best early tier units. So those are your 4 trash. Jumping up to your to your mainstream then, there's only 1 infantry, and that are the Angmar infantry.
Have faith in the Iron Crown.
They are the first unit to get the Legion denomination, but the Legion denomination doesn't show in custom battle because none of these units have been trained. But
To hold the banner of the Witch King.
they will say Legio 1, whatever, wherever they're from. They can make a shield wall as well, which is quite useful, and I think the conscripts can as well. No, they do a shiltrum. Sorry. So Angmar infantry are the first to do shield wall. There's 177 of them for the cost of 600, so getting on and being a little bit more expensive, but still nothing on the dwarves or the elves or the Dunedain. Total defense of 11, attack of 6, solid first usable infantry. Supporting them is your first ranged unit. They are the Angmar archers.
It is an honor to hold the banner of the Witch King.
And they are relatively good early tier archers. 3 attack, melee, 3 missile, 3 charge, 6 defense. They are acceptable early tier archers, as I say, with a 565 on the recruitment cost, range of 160, missiles 24, so just early tier archers. Now, we move over to your cavalry, and it's a little unique because all 4 of your main cavalry units are ranged. And they are broken up into the distinction of the 2 lower tier are called Warg X, so Warg Skirmishers and Warg Raiders, and the second tier are both Mount Graham, so Mount Graham Raiders and Mount Graham Marauders. The Raider unit in both lines is the one that shoots arrows, and the Marauder/Skirmisher are the javelins. So we'll start with the archers. So Warg Raiders, probably just call them Warg Archers to be honest, it'd make it a bit easier. Their melee attack is only 4, but their missile attack is also 4, which is better than your Angmar. Total defense of 7, and of course they're mounted, which can never be something. It's always something you have to think about. Mobility is very useful. Their recruitment cost is 670 though, so a little bit more expensive again, but they do have 32 missiles and 110 meter range, which is a low range, I grant you. You have to get a bit closer with the cavalry. But an excellent, it's very useful to have cavalry in an early tier roster. Cavalry archers, sorry. Next up then, your javelins, the Warg Skirmishers. They have a melee attack of 5, so they are better once they have finished with their range. Their missile attack is 8, and their charge bonus is 6. So they are better in melee than the Raiders, with a defense of 9 as well. They are just overall better. This is the more melee-focused cavalry. Same in the second tier, that the javelin one is more melee focused. They're effective against armor as well, which is quite interesting, so they get a little armor bonus, and of course they scare horses, as do all Warg units. You only get 4 javelins per man though, and 65 meter range, so you've got to get up close and personal, but you'll note they cost a little bit more. So then we come to the rough approximation of the barracks event, although do note that certain of these units do come before the barracks event, but this is where it generally lies in terms of stats. And we'll start again with Ruadau. So at the second tier of Ruadau, you get the wonderful unit, one of my favourites, the Ruadau Warriors. That is because they are axe throwers. Harkening back to the days of Battle for Middle-earth 2, you have an axe-throwing Ruadau unit. They're effective against armor as well, which is very, very nice. Missile attack of 10, melee attack of 10, defense of 11. They're very aggressive. But you only get 3 axes per man with 65 meter range as well, means you've got to get very close to the enemy. And you'll note they are mercenaries, so the cost varies, but we should get an idea of the cost with the Huskarls. Ruadau Huskarls are a better version of the Savages all round. Still effective against armor, 8 attack, 8 charge, 13 defense. They are, as you can see, more than double the defense with a 2 extra in both of the attack and charge. They're just better strike infantry. And they don't cost too much more for the privilege either, so you should be massing these as often and as quickly as possible when you break into the barracks event. Their morale is only good though, and the morale response is impetuous, so do note that none of the Angmar early tier units, or even the mainstream post-barracks event, have particularly good morale. They're not going to fight forever. They are not Dunedain, they're not elves, they are not dwarves. You are, remember at all times, akin to Northmen. But then we come to your dedicated Angmarim, the Iron Crown Halberdiers and Warriors. None can stand against us. The Iron Crown Warriors are 2-handed swordmen, as you can see. They have a high attack to compensate for that, or to reflect that, with a good charge of 6 and a total defense of 15. So they are, again, strike infantry. They're not hold-the-line infantry. They are at their best on the offensive, but they do have a high defense, so they can hold the line in a pinch. They cost a little bit more than the Ruadau Savages, and they are not armor piercing. Oh, and they're missing an N there. That's frustrating. And they're not armor piercing, so they won't perform as well in the flank as the Huskarls, potentially. But do note, of course, that they have a considerably higher attack and a much better defense, so they probably will do just as well as the Huskarls, although they might be better against very heavily armoured enemies.
We fight for Angmar.
Continuing with the theme of armour piercing, we then come to the Halberdiers, who are, of course, effective against armour. So you've got a lot of armour piercing options as Angmar, which is quite useful given that Imladris and Ered Luin and the Dunedain are all heavily armoured. So we've given you the tools to get the job done. But the Halberdiers have a 6 attack, a 5 charge and a 15 defence. But do note that their animation is nowhere near as good as the Pikes. It is still a little bit of an advantage over the standard sort of sword and shield style animations, but it's not as good as the Pikes. So do be careful when using them, but also do use them defensively. That is entirely their purpose. And they will get a lot of kills. They will do very, very well. And do note that in version 3, Halberdiers across the board were edited and changed so that they no longer suffer massive penalties against infantry. They are now not as good against cavalry as they once were, but they are now considerably better against infantry, and Halberdiers now rightfully return as a very, very elite and useful defensive unit, so do use them where you can. Supporting them then are your Iron Crown Longbowmen, who are much better, of course, than Angmar archers, with a melee attack of 6 and a missile of 5, with a charge of 3 and a defense of 14. Compared with the Angmar archers, they are just overall considerably better. Almost double stats across the board, but you don't pay double to get them, which is always very useful. So you should always be switching out for Longbowmen whenever possible and as soon as possible, because the archers won't hold a candle to the Longbowmen. Finally, then, we come to the Mount Graham Raiders and... is it Marauders or Skirmishers? I can't recall. It is Marauders. So we'll start with the Marauders because they're on the left. So you'll note that they do have a different visual in terms of the actual orcs themselves, with the lower tier looking more wild and brown, and the upper tier looking more ordered and black. In terms of the colouring, because the darker colour your armour is, the more evil you are, as we all know. So... Mount Graham Marauders, scare horses, of course, because they're wargs. Now, I've spoken untrue, I'm afraid, because they are not a javelin unit. They were a javelin unit for a long time, that's why it's in my mind. Because there was an outcry, essentially, that could they have one dedicated charge cavalry before you get to the very rare Guardians, and it was deemed they should have that. So the Marauders are a dedicated charging cavalry. Attack of 7, charge of 9, and a total defense of 16. They will do very, very well on the charge and are excellent at chasing down routing enemies. They cost a relatively large amount, though, at 930. A lot of elite units cost sort of upward of 1,000, so you're getting there with the cost. Lastly, then, the Bodyguard of Drangu, the Mount Graham Raiders. Missile of 6, melee of 6, charge of 6, and a 13 total defense. So, obviously, considerably better than the early tier Raiders. 447 plays 6613. But still... a very useful unit all round, and you don't pay double the cost for them. So again, swap out Mount Graham for Wog, or the other way around, as soon as possible. Finally, then, we come to your sort of uber elites, or rather actually just your elites. You don't really have any ubers, I'm afraid. And your dedicated mainstream elites are the Northguard.
For the Witch King!
They are, again, armour piercing. They have a large mace and a nice shield, heavy black armour, which many people lamented was going to be lost when Angmar was changed, but in fact was kept, as they wear the armour that the old Witch Realm units used to wear. 7 attack, charge of 5, but their real glory is their 24 total defense. So you'll note that they're not the most aggressive unit you've got, but their total defense of 24, coupled with their armour piercing, means they will survive for a long time against any real foe. A very good unit all round, and of course Lord Skuld's bodyguard as well. Supporting them from various locations are Hoonvorn's Barrowite Legions. And there they are in all their Arnorian helmeted glory, with their very otherworldly voices. So they are again effective against armour. It's really a key selling point of Angmar, is that no enemy really stands a hope of defending against you. But their attack is 12, their charge is 5, their defense is 20. Now do note their defense comes almost entirely from defense skill, meaning archers will very easily kill them. But do note that they do have 2 hit points, meaning they have to be killed twice. And that's very likely to be increased in post version 3, whatever is next. But in version 3, these are their stats. But they will be made a bit stronger in future versions. But at the minute, they have 82 wraiths, wights. 2 hit points, as I say, defense of 20. They are excellent flanking units, and they cannot run away, but they will break relatively easily. So their single purpose of kill everything means they will stay and fight forever, but they might get a little bit worse when they realise they're the only ones left doing that. And as I say, they are Hoonvorn's bodyguard. And then your last archer unit then are the Dark Blades, which I appreciate is a little bit of a misnomer, really, given the fact that they are archers and yet their name is Blade, and that is because once they have finished with their bows, they are dual-wielding units. They have a sword in each hand. And to reflect that, we called them Dark Blades because we thought it was cool. They also can use to sharpen stakes, so they are your dedicated stake unit. They frighten nearby enemy infantry, which is a wonderful little trait. Their defense is quite low, though, at 14, but with their high melee of 13 and their missile of 6, which is akin to other human rangers. But do note they don't have the range or the missiles of other rangers, nor do they have the accuracy. But they are an excellent archer unit, and they are close to human rangers, but where they shine is that they make up very well in melee what they lack at range. As I say, with the 13 melee attack. Do note they require a Frozen North region, and that basically just means every region that borders the most northerly wasteland region, which you cannot access, you can train these from. And then normally the region below that as well. So Karndum, Shadoon, Litash, all the way across to Kizilgathor. Oh, it's not called that, is it? It's called Kizil... It's not Kizilkum, is it? Kirid Gathol. It's called Kirid Gathol. The Iron Hills provinces would have been easier to say. So basically every northern region you get Dark Blades from. I don't think I mentioned if Northgard... No, I said they were available everywhere, because they are indeed. The Barrowites, of course, only come from certain regions, as I laboured in the first half. Do note as well that I've actually mentioned... I said Lord Skuld had Northgard, and that is also erroneous. Lord Skuld has Dark Blades. No one in version 3 has Northgard as a bodyguard. And finally, then we come to the Witch King's bodyguard, but a unit you can train before he joins you, and they are the Guardians of Karndum. They are a mounted version of the Northgard, as you can see, and they get a bonus against other mounts. They are effective against armour. They frighten nearby enemy infantry. They have a defense of 23, a charge of 7, and an attack of 8, meaning they are really very powerful. But do note that they don't even have the highest tier morale of excellent. They're 1 down with very good, and they don't have locked morale. But they only come from Karndum, so they're really rare. The Witch King is likely to be one of only sort of 3 of these units you'll ever really probably get. So, but they are really very good when you do get them. And lastly, before the video cometh to its conclusion, we come to the standard bodyguard for Angmar, the Witch Knights.
I am the Fist of Angmar.
I am the Fist of Angmar. And they are your generic bodyguard. Frightened nearby enemy infantry, always very useful in a bodyguard unit. They have an attack of 10, a charge of 5, and a 29 total defense, making them your actually most defensive unit, with 15 of that being in armor skill. So a really excellent bodyguard unit. And you will note that they have the shields that once adorned the old Guardians of Karndum and the old bodyguard of Angmar when they were orcs before they were turned to humans. Although it's something I've always thought with these, and I realise now that it's actually just that they've got brown beards, but like this gentleman here looks like he's got fangs. Does anyone else see that that looks like an orc mouth? Because to me, that looks like an orc mouth. And I don't know, therefore, if it's designed to be that. He's definitely a human, but this one here to me just looks like he's an orc. And I always thought that. But this one's got a beard, obviously, so there's variation amongst them, and maybe 1 or 2 of them are orcs. Create your own backstory. But anyway, the Witch Knights, there we are, as your bodyguard. The recruitment cost, of course, of 1,000 is irrelevant, really. You can train them, and you can train them from Karndum, and you will get a bodyguard every time you do that. But it does cost you 1,000 for the pleasure. Alright, and now we'll hand everyone over to the AI. And we will get rid of that as well. And have a little bit of a mock battle against the computer. Now, I know that and there aren't going to be individual faction overviews, but the faction we are fighting against will be part of the next episode of the version 3 overviews, or their culture will be present, and I ask thee what you think they might be. Who are we up against? How many hats? Sorry, totally unrelated. But kudos to anyone that can get that reference, but I don't think you will. It's really obscure. But this unit here is a massive giveaway for who I'm currently showing off against at the moment. There's ballistas flying in. And as we brace and move closer, it is, of course, the Northern Dunedain. Because the next one of these overviews will cover Dunedain. So that is, as I say, the Ardadaim, Gondor, Dol Amroth, and the Northern Dunedain. And there they are in all their splendour, marching towards us. Their pikemen have been fully upgraded. Oh no, they always look like that, don't they? Of course, foolish. Foolish, very foolish. And there's Cardland Sentinels. They're going to feature in the next episode, I can tell you that for free. There's Lumbermen of Bree, charging here, there, and everywhere, running into each other. And then just to say that that's going to have to be the end then, because I'm not going to re-record that battle. I foolishly, of course, have not renamed my axe throwers, so as soon as the Ruadar axe throwers threw their axes, the game crashed. But anyway, that is the Angmar overview. So next time, as I say, it will be the Dunedain. I do hope you're having fun with Angmar in version 3, and until we speak again, dear friends, Navair Naden Pedamad Melonin, and farewell.